I've had this conversation. I ask everyone I have dinner with this question, which is, do you find in the midst of all of this sadness and chaos and decline, rapid decline, that your personal relationships are deeper and more fulfilling?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, for me,
you do feel that.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no question about it for me. I mean, I have little kids. My oldest is 5, so I've just in the last few years, started like having kids. So yes, and I have great friends, and through this weird internet world where we are, I've kind of cultivated like a really great audience of a lot of really cool people.
Yes.
And yeah, I think that there's,
So you think you're relating to people in a deeper way than you did, say, 5 or 6, 10 years ago?
I think 100%.
Yes.
There's been a big period for me kind of growing up. I had a very like prolonged adolescence kind of. I was a stand-up comedian, kind of living a degenerate life for many years. And then I settled down and got married and had kids. So that's just aside from the craziness of the world.
Right.
I think whenever you go through that, you're just living in a better way.
How blessed are you, though?
Very, 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 very.
Because that's like that's your fortress against, that protects you from everything else.
Exactly. Because it's just, it's whatever this is the thing that was kind of, I know you sent me when I tweeted something about this, but where like when you don't have God, whatever's next highest in line becomes in effect your God. And there is something about, I did not have God or family, and my own family. I had family members who I love, but I didn't have my own family. And my whole life, I kind of like, I was like a 90s kid. I grew up I was born in 1983. I grew up in the 90s. Nobody I knew was religious.
Yes.
And we did not have, like all of the traditions that many previous generations grew up with, where they're like God, country, chivalry, these things. You wear this uncomfortable outfit here because that's what's expected of you around other people when you go to church. You strap on these boots. It was like, no, we just grew up in blue jeans and sneakers. And the point of life was kind of like to get through school, to go play. You know what I mean? When I was a teenager, it was like to like smoke pot or try to get laid or something, you know what I mean? Like it was all just kind of like revolved around what's fun. And it wasn't until I got married and when we had my first kid and I found God also at that same time, that I've been living a totally different life, where my life is kind of centered around this purpose, that there's meaning to it, and it's not really about me. And whether I'm having fun, like I still like to have fun sometimes, but it's like that's really not that important. Like what's really important is that like I'm being a great husband to my wife. I'm being a great father to my kids. And ironically, to some degree, you just find much deeper happiness when you're not living just for happiness.
We were talking about this off camera. I really wish this had been on camera because it was so interesting what you were saying. But you didn't grow up in a conventional 2-parent household.
No.
Right.
No, my parents got divorced when I was 3.
That's young.
Yeah.
So you grew up in a single-parent household, but you seem to have kind of figured out the formula so well. And I said, well, how did you know that? How did you?
Well, I mean, look, it's a mix of a few things. My mother was a really great mother. So I only had one parent, but I did have a really good parent, and she did instill a lot of, like good values in me. And I don't mean if that kind of contradicts what I just said before. Like she did instill good values in me, even though we didn't have kind of like, God or anything like that. And it was something that was just instinctually in me when I first had kids, that I just wanted to give them that. And the other major factor there is that my wife is just like the best person I've ever met. And I got very lucky again and just met a really great girl. And that is, there is nothing better than being in a great marriage. And I would imagine, I've never experienced it, but nothing worse than being
I think
in
that's
a really
exactly,
bad
I think
one.
it's like burning to death.
Yeah.
The people I know who've
I've known people like that who are like
too.
with a really crazy chick, and
they
just
can't
like,
even
my
think
God.
straight because they're in agony all the time.
Yeah, it's horrible.
But it's just interesting. I think maybe I'm very distressed by the number of kids growing up in single parent households. I grew up in a single parent household when I was a kid, so I'm not judging anybody.
Yeah.
But it's, in retrospect, I think, well, maybe if you grew up that way as you did and I did, you don't take things for granted, and you're more intentional in the way you structure your own family. Because you said to me off air, you're like, I wanted this.
Yeah, and I also just have the attitude that like, I think that And I blame the baby boomers for almost all of our problems.
I do too.
And I don't obviously when you speak about a group that big, I'm painting with a broad brush. There are exceptions to this rule. And I love my mother very much and she's a good person. But as a generation, they just ruined everything. And they're totally selfish.
Yes.
Completely. Jeff Deist, who I love, this guy is so brilliant. But he said, he gave a speech about it and he was going through the things of like all of the slogans of the baby boomers and how self-serving they all were. Like it was like, don't trust anyone over 30 until they got into their 30s, you know, and then it was like, and then like you watch it all the way through like COVID. It's like, we got to do everything we can to protect like the baby boomer generation.
Old people are the most important.
Yes, it went from don't trust anyone over 30 to being like, screw your childhood. I don't want to get this. Keep your hands off my Medicare, by the way. You know, like everything is just, and but one of the major things that they changed about the culture was like normalizing casual divorce.
Yeah.
As if that should just kind of be an option. Like, I'm just not feeling it anymore. So like we can get divorced. And like, there's no sense of like, no. Like, look, there are exceptions. There are cases where there's an abusive spouse or something like that. But generally speaking, the idea like you took an oath before God and everyone you love and then brought children into this world.
I know.
That is your obligation.
I know.
And that's like my attitude toward marriage is that it's like, listen, me and my wife, we've faced some hurdles in our marriage, like things in the outside world that have happened. Of
course.
And I think we've done a very good job of them. We've had serious issues, like we had major health concerns with one of our kids, and got through that. We've been through lockdowns and been through all this stuff.
And there's more ahead.
There's a lot more ahead. But one thing that is for certain is that's it.
Yeah,
it's us for the rest of this. Like we're living this life together now, and to me, that's what being married is.
Well, if you're
not that, you're not really married.
If you're trapped, you'll make do. By the way, that sounds grim, but it's not grim. I have the same kind of marriage. I've had a happy marriage for 33 years. One of the reasons is that this is what we're doing.
Yeah, that's right.
And I grew up with divorce. I remember as a child, my only brother feels that we would talk about this when we were kids, like, fuck adults, like, fuck them.
Yeah.
Having kids and then getting divorced so you can go find yourself in France. Fuck you.
I knew people in my listen, in my parents' generation, there were so many people like that. So many people I know. And totally fucked up the kids and did it because like I gotta be happy, as if somehow that's a noble thing of like, I gotta be happy.
Well,
like,
but they never turned out happy.
No, because the key to real happiness, I mean, there's different ways to measure happiness or like whatever. Again, like, there's someone training for a marathon and there's someone sitting having a bag of potato chips. And in the moment, the guy having the bag of potato chips might be happier than the guy training for the marathon. But like, ultimately, who's going to feel better about themselves is going to be, you know what I mean? So like, there's, but
you how do you want to die?
You have obligations and responsibilities.
Yeah.
And if you don't fulfill those, you're not going to find long-term
But also
happiness.
take the long view. Like, the neighborhood I grew up in had all kinds of rich divorced moms, and every one of them was crazy and unhappy. Every single one of them. And you wonder where I've thought in the years since, like, where are they now? You know what I mean? Living in some condo in Scottsdale with Parkinson's, unvisited by their kids. Like, you'd get old and die in the end. And when you do, I really hope I'm surrounded by all my girls and my son, and like, oh, he was such a good guy. Like,
yeah, that's all that matters. Really.
That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they like talk about you at dinner when you're gone. Oh, I miss him. You don't want people. I've seen people die who mistreated their children. I've lived it actually. And it's like, fuck that person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want that.
And also, look, I mean, that kind of the absence of having that feeling, or the baby boomers kind of not feeling that way. It's kind of like, I mean, look what it's led to. I mean, I know. It's very easy for say popular conservative, pundits to kind of dunk on college kids and stuff like that, which is like fun. And I've enjoyed videos of where, like Ben Shapiro is like destroying 19-year-old in some college campus. And, it's like, she's like, some trans kid or something like that, and is like, well, I was born a boy, but why can't I live as a woman? And he's like, why can't you live as a cat? And everyone's like, and it's like, the intellectual prowess of destroying this kid. And like, yes, okay, that is stupid. That kid was an idiot. But you also kind of like peel a little bit deeper, and you're like, so what was this kid's situation really? Because you're talking to a 19-year-old, you know what I mean? And let me guess, came from a broken home.
I'm trying not to pound the table here because I agree with you so strongly.
Was medicated, I bet, like as a young kid.
And is staring down the barrel of a grim life.
Yes. Has no conceivable path toward like independence and
toward what you have and what you grew up with.
That's all that really
And you're
matters.
in charge of the society, by the way. You're in charge of the society. You have influence in the society. You're in the privileged class. And there's no shame in that, by the way.
Yes.
But it does carry with it the obligation to see that the next generation has a decent shot. And you haven't done that. You've wasted it all on foreign adventurism and your stupid economic ideas. And this is the result. And you will take no responsibility for it. It's like, stupid kids. No, your job is to create another generation of smart kids.
And then they
wise kids.
And they mock them. They're like, oh, well, maybe if you don't have your avocado toast and your lattes, then you'd be able to buy a house or something. And you're like, look, okay, it is true.
You're making me mad. Well, I totally agree.
It's true that this generation is in many ways softer and more privileged. And part of that's because they grew up with technological wealth that previous generations never had. It's also partly because their parents never instilled like values in them to care about kind of more than just avocado toast. But the fact is that baby boomers could go to college and get a summer job and pay for their college, okay? And then if they didn't go to college, they could go to high school and then go wait online and get a job where you could support a wife and kids off of that job. This is my and that was the way of the world previously, that my grandfather worked in factories his whole life and his wife didn't work. And that was that. And he owned a house, he sent kids to college, he had 2 cars, like they had a nice life. And these kids today come out with 6 figures of debt and are getting a job at, Starbucks, and houses are going for like $600,000 for, you know what I mean? For that same humble house that my grandfather had. And the baby boomers all got rich by the value of their house just going up.
Couldn't agree more.
And it seems like not a one of them ever went, hey, but aren't we kind of like pulling up the ladder on the helicopter here? Like if my house is like skyrocketing in value, that's nice for me. I got a HELOC and I got like some money coming in now that I can invest in the market that's going up and make this income coming in. But what about the next generation? How are they ever going to buy a house?
They don't care.
And like no one seemed to care about that.
They don't care. And I'm trying not to interrupt your wonderful description with amens and hosannas, but I so strongly agree with what you're saying. And I have a bunch of kids. They're all actually thriving, I would say, inside. They're all good people, clear thinking. They love each other, most important. But I'm around a lot of college-age kids, like a lot, like way more than most people my age. I'm 54, and I don't think they're soft at all. I'm not talking my kids. I mean, their friends or, I'm around it a lot. They're hard-edged, actually.
Right.
They know how, they may be wrong. They may be confused, but they're actually pretty tough in a way, and they're pretty angry, and they sort of get what's going on, and I have deep sympathy for them. Deep. They've been completely screwed over by the people in charge. They don't have any power. Even if you're a 19-year-old Columbia kid, like I may not agree with your slogans or down with white people, or whatever. Of course I hate that. I am a white person, but I do sort of like think, whose fault is that? It's the people who run everything. It's your stupid boomer parents.
Yep.
It's the administrators at the school. It's our politicians. I mean, I'm sorry to blame society for the crimes of young people, but actually society does deserve the blame, and the leaders of the society deserve the blame.
Yeah, 100%.
That's not a liberal perspective. That's a conservative perspective. I care about the next generation. That's how, if you don't care about how your grandchildren are going to live here, how are you conservative? What are you conserving? You're not at all. You're just a freaking grifter. Shut up.
Right. And like and this is why, when you were on my podcast, we set the internet on fire by because I trashed Bill Buckley, and then you were like, I completely agree with you.
You're not allowed to have that.
I said
view.
He was one of the great villains of the 20th century.
Well, he was a gatekeeper for sure.
Right. I mean, people started, they were like, "Wow, that's Stalin and Mao Zedong," and I'm like, okay, fine, he was third. But the point is, okay, there were like 5 ahead of him. Okay, fine, but I think part of this is that a lot of the kind of conservatism Inc. people who criticized us for saying that, and they're kind of like, well, how would you, this was the guy who was the most prominent member of the conservative movement, and it's like, okay, and so like what exactly was conserved in his movement? What, like, just explain. Was it the Constitution? Was it what? classical liberal values? Was it religion? Was it tradition? Was it the definition of a woman? Like, what exactly was the big conservative win here? I mean, like I'll give you some. We still have some gun rights, okay? You know, like I don't know, but like you lost everything. You lost the United States of America, and part of the reason, a major reason why, is because the whole National Review, like takeover of the conservative movement, was to drive out all of the non-interventionists. All of the isolationists.
I watched it
demonize
happen.
them as racist every single time.
I watched it happen, and the weird, don't even. I'm holding back. But no, because that's like I was adjacent to that world my entire life, and I watched it happen, and I knew Bill Buckley, and he was perfectly nice to me. I didn't hate him or anything, but
he was very charming and very smart guy, I guess. For sure, but,
I was playing the WASP. It was all a pose. It was completely fake, and the only people who sort of bought it are people who didn't know any better and thought that was like upper class or something. Fake accent, weird homoerotic stuff, and it was like all just kind of sad. Actually, I thought that was always my view of it because he was posing. But I think he had good qualities. I love sailing, so I kind of I'm with him on that. But in the end, you judge the tree by its fruits. And the fruits are just absolutely rotten. And so I think it's important to be honest about that.
Well, I think the fruits were a transformation of the right wing in America from being the old right, which was really, I mean, they were fairly isolationist, but certainly non-interventionist. I mean, like, Robert Taft was the one who didn't want us to be in NATO. I mean, this was like the old, and they were big on like immigration controls, sound money, and not getting involved in wars. These were the people who opposed World War I and World War II. They didn't want American involvement in these wars, right? And the effect of Bill Buckley was to transform what became the conservative movement into being Cold Warriors. That what we do is we go everywhere around the world looking for a war to fight.
So in other words, the people who really loved America, not the idea, but the physical reality of America and her people, the people who actually live here and their homes and their little towns and their dumb little jobs and all the stuff that makes up a civilization at scale, the people who cared about that somehow became anti-American.
Right. Yeah.
And the people who would lecture you about how America's an idea, and it doesn't really matter who lives here, what? Those people are for America? I mean, it's like a complete inversion of reality, actually.
Yeah.
And so again, it's nothing personal against Bill Buckley, who I played a mean harpsichord, but sorry, not to be catty, but but like, that's a lie.
Yeah.
And the people who care about actual America are the people whose side I'm on. And I care about actual America, not because I'm a good person. I'm really not an especially good person, because I got a lot of children who live here.
Yeah.
That's what I care about.
Yeah. And like, because look at this was a really great country. And I mean, there are still a lot of great things about it, but it's deteriorating. And why should we be for that? And, one of the crazy things about America is that there is kind of this idea that we are the United States of America and have been this whole time, whereas there's really been like several revolutions in the country. And what? Look, I mean, I think the George W. Bush years and the war on terrorism was a revolution of sorts in the country.
That's for sure.
I grew up a kid in the 90s. We are not the same country as we were in the 1990s. In the pre-war on terror, before the Patriot Act and the Department of Homeland Security and the TSA, I mean, the experience at an airport is a different thing. We are a different country than we were before that. I think COVID has changed everything, that. But even before that, I mean, as you've talked about a lot, like in the wake of World War II, the creation of the CIA. This was a revolution in the country where it changed who's running the government. And we think of the position of President of the United States of America being the same position that that Woodrow Wilson occupied or something like that. And it's not. It's a totally different position. Donald Trump did not have the same job FDR had. They were very, very different,
close.
And so there is... When people say, oh, you love America, it's like, yes, I love this country. I don't like the direction the government's going in. I don't care for these new powers.
And the Bush thing, I have to say, I could feel it at the very beginning. I knew him before he became president. I did not want to vote for him and didn't. I just didn't vote. I did vote for him the second time because you always get caught up in the other guy. And I knew Kerry, and I just thought Kerry was not impressive at all. So I voted for Bush. But, I see Bush still. I had a meal with him not that long ago, and talk about a defeated, sad guy, actually. Bitter, insecure, given to lecturing everyone around him about what a great president he was. And I thought, that really is, no, but that's the fruit of the tree, kind of.
Right.
Like, if you've had a successful life, if you've done the things that if you've fulfilled your obligation and done the right thing, you're not lecturing people about what a great person you are.
Right.
At all. Are you?
No, I don't think so.
No, that's failure, actually.
And like, I mean, just...
He knows.
He knows. To try to spin the George W. Bush years as anything other than like an absolute failure. I mean, dude, you celebrated mission accomplished, and then we stayed in the war for 20 years.
I know.
Just a disaster, and left the country. And I mean, look, not only was it all completely unnecessary. I mean, like, we had like the special ops response to Al-Qaeda cells in Afghanistan in late 2001. Totally justify that.
Oh, of course.
We had an opportunity to trap Osama bin Laden in Tora Bora in late 2001, and they, I believe, intentionally let him go so they could continue these wars. But fighting the decision.
Do you think that's what happened?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's I highly recommend to anybody. Scott Horton wrote a book called Enough Already, which is like a masterpiece. It's a history of all the terror wars, and it seems overwhelmingly likely that they already had their eye on Iraq, and that they knew that if they captured Osama bin Laden, it'd be very difficult to sell another war because we got the guy.
If that's really true, I mean, that's unspeakably evil.
Yeah.